Have you got your specs on? Hi,
I
everyone.
have now. I'm sorted. I was just something in the eye.
Perfect. Hi. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome. Just to make everyone aware, so this session is recorded. So feel free to keep your cameras off if you feel more comfortable. Keep yourselves muted. You are also welcome to engage with the chat. We love that. But yeah, so the session is being recorded as well as. So yeah, today's session is all about preventing stress. So just while we give people a couple of minutes to join, we thought we'd start with a mini quiz. So these were actually supposed to come through one at a time, but Teams loves playing with my PowerPoint animation, so it's fine. So just while we wait for people to join, do we think it's true or false that stress is always bad for us? And if people want to use the chat function, drop a T, an F, a true or false. You can also raise your hands, you can react, you can stick a thumbs up. Okay, we've got a couple of falses. Perfect. So that is false. So stress can energize us and it can motivate us and it can help us to feel empowered and capable when it's in the right amount. Stress impacts sleep. Do we think that's a true or false statement? We've got a true there. Yeah. Couple of trues. Oh, all trues. Yeah, perfect. So again, stress can impact sleep. It can make sleep more difficult. It can disrupt our sleep. But then also disrupted and poor sleep can make us much more sensitive to stress anyway. So it works both ways. Stress can change your appetite. Do we think that's true or false? Yay, we've got a couple of truths coming through. So yeah, so when we're experiencing stress and that overwhelm and all that fight-flight response is kicking off, typically our digestive response kind of gets turned off for the time being. So our appetite goes out the window. And then when it just starts to turn back on, we might crave sugars and carbs and takeaways and convenience food that are going to give us short, sharp hits of calories, essentially. Stress can change your relationships. Do we think that's true or false, that stress can impact them in some sort of way? True. Okay, we're getting a few trues come through again. Oh, love it. Full of geniuses on this one today. So yes, so stress can make us like snappier with people. It can make us so tired that we don't feel like we've got the same energy to give to our relationships. We might be less motivated as well. And also at the same time, it can really bring people together, and like going through a stressful situation together and feeling supported can actually strengthen your relationships. And as much as, you know, lots of people have heard of that like fight-flight response, our first instinct in a period of feeling a little bit stressed is actually to seek support from other people and to offload and to share things and bounce ideas off each other. So actually, relationships can be strengthened through stress. And lastly, it can be hard to think when you're stressed. Do we think that's true or false? Okay, again, getting lots of issues. Oh, and absolutely, someone's passionate about this. So yes, so stress is designed to make us think more quickly and make decisions more quickly and to focus on, you know, the stressor, the threat that we're seeing. But longer term actually can make it really, really difficult to focus and to plan and to prioritize and to organize things. So yeah, absolutely can have an impact. So today's webinar, we're thinking all about understanding stress and planning for stress, managing it as it arises, and very, very much preventing stress, I suppose. Everything we're going to talk about today is very, very, very much adapted to the automotive industry and keeping the industry in mind, particularly because March is coming up and it's a very, very busy period, as can be September. But I believe, Nigel, that March is even more so. So yeah,
it is, yeah, because we get a lot of registrations in March, with it being the new registration period, so it does intensify during that period.
Yeah, so we've got a full series of webinars. So we've got today, we've got stuff on managing mental health, unwinding after work and improving sleep. And again, all developed with the automotive industry in mind. But just before we go any further, just to give you a bit of introductions, so my name's Hayley. I'm the training director at PMAC, and essentially we came along to this webinar and wanted to work with ECS just because we came to realise how many challenges there are in this industry and how overwhelming it can be. And what we want to do is give people tools and strategies to make that less so, and to make things as easy and as bearable as possible, and to give people tools, hopefully before they notice any changes to their mental health. And we brought along with us Nigel from ECS.
How do you do? Good afternoon, everybody. Yep, my name's Nigel Cuddy. I'm the Senior Regional Manager. Look after a lot of the automotive things we do throughout the UK and Irish markets. See the need for something like this within the auto trade. And we've decided that the best team to work with is PMAC, with all their expertise. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, so just to give you a bit of an idea, we are going to be talking about stress. We're going to break it down, and typically we tend to give some like practical tips for the industry first, followed by some tips to kind of manage the psychological impact. So when we're talking about stress, we're really talking about a response to something that we're seeing as stressful. So it's a physical thing, it's an emotional thing, it's a mental, psychological thing. And when we're talking about like, you know, something that we see stressful, essentially all of us find different things overwhelming. What stresses Nigel out, I might feel is manageable. What stresses me out, somebody else might laugh at and feel like it's absolutely fine. And stress can come from internal factors, like that we're putting pressure on ourselves and we're holding ourselves to like unrealistic standards, or we're trying to please everyone all the time. They might come from external stuff as well. So like, you know, an influx in work, answering, you know, having loads and loads of phone calls, having, you know, people queuing outside the doors in the morning before you're even open, you know, so it can be internal, it can be external, it can be a very short-term thing, it can be a long-term thing. And again, like what I consider to be something that's short-term might feel like a very long-term thing for Nigel, and vice versa. Like everyone's perception of all this is very different. But when we're talking about the impact of stress, stress impacts us in a variety of ways, and they're designed to serve a function. So stress makes our heart race, and it makes us breathe more quickly, and it can increase our temperature. And because we're hot, we might start sweating because our body tries to cool us back down. And again, our appetite is suppressed and digestion kind of pauses. So we might need the toilet. We might notice headaches because all of our muscles are tense, including things like in our forehead. Our jaws might get tense. Like all of these things happen because our stress response was designed to help us prepare to react in the face of like life-threatening situations. And the problem is now we're not facing life-threatening situations as often, and yet we are exposed to different things that cause these same reactions. Mentally, again, we're supposed to think really quick and make decisions more quickly. And it means that we aren't able to concentrate on everything all at once because we tend to kind of tunnel in on one thing. And it can make us predict the worst because our brains are trying to think about what's going to happen, what's going to go wrong, so I'm prepared for it. Or it can make us feel like, actually, I'm really good now at prioritizing, and, you know, actually, I just deal with the most important thing, and actually, I feel much more prepared. And emotionally, we can feel overwhelmed. We can find ourselves getting a bit snappy or frustrated over a period of time. So again, maybe thinking towards the end of March, you might start noticing people actually kind of start to look a bit more low and feeling numb and kind of a bit switched off, for example. But typically our emotions can feel a little bit all over the place. So we really want to prepare for the fact that we know March is going to be stressful. And it's kind of a luxury really, that we know that something's coming. We know exactly what's coming. We know how it's going to look. We know how long it's going to last. Like that doesn't often happen when we're dealing with things like ill health or financial stress or relationship difficulties, for example. Like all those things can feel like unknowns. So actually knowing that March is typically the busiest time of year, that September will also be busy, it means that we can think in advance about what we can do to make that time a little bit easier. So we're going to break it down into a few different things. We're going to be thinking about processes, we're going to be thinking about holding ourselves accountable, and we're going to be thinking about communication. And we're thinking about packing to prepare in the same way that we would do, you know, a child's lunch for the day, we pack before we go on holiday. I can't imagine many people are showing up at the airport and then at that point realizing that there's things they need to think about. So we're just trying to put things in place to make it as easy a process as possible. So on that note, we're going to start with processes. So when we're talking about processes, we're thinking about, like the pre-agreed ways of working that are standardized, that everybody knows what's expected of them, which actually can really increase predictability, which helps to reduce stress in the first place. It means people know what's expected of them, what they can expect of other people. It helps to reduce unnecessary overwhelm and confusion and delays. So like I know, Nigel, you were giving the example of even just knowing who you need to contact if things go wrong.
That's right. Sometimes during that March period, various things will actually go wrong with vehicles, and we know that from time to time. What some people don't always know is who to actually contact when that happens, and that causes delays and it causes anxiety. So the best bet is to always know in advance who you need to discuss various issues with.
Yeah, processes also relate to communication, so like making sure that you're talking to the right people at the right time, you're only sharing what's necessary and relevant, you're not telling Nigel absolutely everything that's going on all day and he can't do much about most of that. And processes also relate to well-being. So again, the longer we're experiencing stress for and the less mindful we are of it and the less we intentionally make changes to support ourselves, the more likely that we are going to struggle with things like thinking and sleep and planning, and the more likely we are to be very reactive, including to other people. So when processes aren't clear from the outset, avoidable stresses arise. So that might be things, Nigel, you can
for example,
this far better.
I'm in the motor trade. I've been a long time, and I tend to be working in various departments. But whenever I'm working within the sales area, from time to time, you do hear the salesman say, "Oh, the vehicle's just arrived, and it'll be ready for you this afternoon, Mr. Customer," without even talking to anybody else, and not realizing how much work's going through the workshop, and that puts a lot of stress on everybody else. But what they tend to forget then is that the customer then gets impacted because it's not ready when they're expecting it. So we should always have clear understanding what everybody should be doing first before they contact the customer.
Yeah. And again, processes will relate to well-being. So when we're stressed, again, things like sleep can go out the window. We're more likely to be very reactive, living on caffeine and sugar out the vending machines because we don't feel like we've got the time or the energy to be thinking about these things and making lunch. It also makes us much more likely to be cynical. And again, like these things are, that we might have to accept to an extent, but also we can do things about. So what do we do? So the first thing we can think about is something called reverse planning. So if we start today, and I, for example, I'm a customer and I want to buy a new car, me starting today, there's so many things that I might need to think about that it can be difficult to work out what I actually, it's worth me spending my time thinking about. When we start at the end goal, for example, like me having a new car that I've just picked up, I've got the keys and I'm leaving the forecourt, it makes it much, much easier when we work backwards from the end goal backwards to preempt problems, to tackle them in advance. It helps to create then a flow chart of processes. So essentially leaders can have a think about, typical challenges, things that arose last September that happen anyway day to day, if there's any themes there, for example, thinking if we can remember back to last March, and essentially like put together a bit of a flow chart of like pre-agreed realistic processes where the leaders of things like the technical team or customer service or sales have all kind of agreed actually what's realistic and doable for everybody. And we can even like have these knocking about places that people frequently attend. They're next to the kettle, they're next to the phones, they're next to their tools, for example, and it can make it very, very easy to just focus on the bit you need to do. And even like, you can take mini sticky notes with car reg plates on and just go through your part of the process, and it helps you to remain accountable. Because we're all going to have a big part to play. Now, reverse planning can be done with regards to like big projects. It can be used for day-to-day stuff. So, for example, if we're thinking about a customer leaving the car with all the paperwork, keys in the hand as the end result, we can work backwards from that and think, right, what's the last thing we need to have sorted so that that bit goes smoothly, so that nothing else kind of goes wrong. So actually we need to make sure that the keys are where people are expecting the keys to be, and that, you know, the paperwork is sorted already. We need to make sure, therefore, that, you know, the customer's been informed, for example, so that they're actually en route to come and get the car. Before that, we might need to make sure that the car is clean. And before it can be clean, we need to make sure that all the necessary checks have been done. So we can essentially work backwards to work out what cannot afford to go wrong at that point. And then we have an idea of what needs to come first. We can also expect the unexpected. So there are always going to be things that come up that we've not accounted for, that we're not hoping for, that we're not looking for. Things can go wrong. And we can account for that. Essentially, we might not necessarily know what's going to come up, whether it is, you know, that other cars are being returned because there's some sort of repairs need doing, or, you know, a warning light's come on, or a battery's gone flat. But what we can do is make sure that we've got some sort of time set aside each day to deal with the unexpected stuff. So whether that's half an hour at, you know, 12 o'clock before everyone has a break for lunch, or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we can have the same people, you know, responsible for, you know, doing the lunchtime in the afternoon, the evening, on Mondays or Tuesdays or Wednesdays. The benefit of doing this is it accounts for some time. It means that the people who are going to be responsible for looking after the unexpected things can mentally prepare. It means that, again, everybody knows where they stand. So it's not like customer services feel like, well, I've just rang Nigel and I've told him it needs sorting, so surely he's working on it now. Like, they know when it's going to be worked on. The team then might be able to plan their day a little bit better. And actually, if things haven't come up, then people have gained a little bit more time back. They might be able to pick up something else. They might be able to support somebody else with something else. But actually, we can just account for that time. Like, when it's happening often enough, it's no longer unexpected. We just don't know what is going to be coming up. And we can also think about wellbeing processes. So again, when we feel stressed and overwhelmed, our habits tend to change, like the time that you go to sleep, the things that you eat, whether you still take the dog for a walk every day or you get somebody else to do it, whether you see your friends on a Thursday or you do things at the weekend. And often we think then that we feel worse because of this stressful situation. And actually, the same can be said for the fact that those things have changed will also be making things more difficult. So looking back at, like, when was the last time that you had a week at work where you felt kind of accomplished and you felt kind of good and you felt like you still had some energy at the weekends? Like, what else was different? Was it that you're going to bed at 10:30? Is it that you know, it's because you've had a bit of time in the morning to yourself, you've had breakfast before you go into work? Like, having to think about what else is different when things are easier, that isn't just about the external stuff that we've got less control over, helps to improve your sense of control. And also, they're very, very, very important in terms of navigating stress. Like, think of these things as like your oil and your water and your tire pressure. Like, we need to make sure these are in check and sorted before this long slog that we've got ahead of us. So, and it's also really important to notice if these things are slipping throughout the month. It's a lot easier to top up the tyre as soon as the warning lights come on, rather than wait until it's completely flat and the car's now immobile. Like, the same, it's just as important when we're thinking about well-being. Like, these are absolutely non-negotiable if we're going to get through. The next thing then that we need to think about is accountability. So whether or not you're holding yourself accountable, whether it's regards to your well-being, the work you're doing, often people kind of shy away from holding themselves accountable because they're worried about criticism from other people or judgment and getting told off, or maybe they feel a bit embarrassed or, you know, a bit ashamed themselves. But actually, when we hold ourselves accountable, it increases our levels of, like, perceived control. So it makes us feel like we're more in control than when it feels like everything's running away from us and we're kind of hiding from it. So I know, Nigel, you put this example.
Yeah, it's surprising how it does impact other people, and we all have to be accountable for it. At the end of the day, it's a team effort. And even like today, I was in a meeting and the after sales manager came out of the meeting and somebody had left 3 keys on his desk. No notes, no nothing. And that doesn't help anybody. So everybody's got to know what their areas are and their accountability, and making sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, because, like, everything that we do will have the consequences that we're hoping for, and it'll also come with other consequences that we weren't planning for, and we didn't want, and we didn't expect. So we have these intended consequences. So like taking that example on the previous slide of like things being rushed through, it might be that people are pushing them through because they've got commission in mind, or because it's going to help them to feel accomplished, or because it's going to help people to feel like they've then got less jobs to do. Like often these things come about either because people are rushing, or they're overwhelmed, or because they're feeling excitable even, and they feel energized or ambitious. So they're just trying to get everything done as quick as can. But the reality is, like, you're still going to be, you know, in this example, have to deal with the same customer for longer, potentially, because there is a bit of a gap there and the car won't be ready necessarily. And they're still going to get paid at the same time regardless. And the unintended consequences that we're not thinking about will be things like extra stress for you if the customer then gets annoyed, or the technicians are having a go at you because things aren't ready. You might end up falling out with team members, complaints, for example. So where we can, just holding ourselves accountable. So again, take the same example. If actually you just call the customers when the car is ready to be picked up, or to let them know of the delivery date, they might then feel like you're keeping in touch before. They feel like you're going above and beyond, rather than you promising something that you can't then fulfill. And the customers can manage their own expectations. It buys you a bit of time. Things might not take 3 days. If they think it's going to be 3 days and it's ready sooner, like, it feels like you've just, again, moved mountains. You've made things happen for people. And again, it can reduce your own stress and improve your relationships with other people. So it can be useful to just kind of ask yourself before you agree to things, before you say yes to things, before you know, whether it's customers, a manager, someone in another team, like just pausing for literally a second and just ask yourself, like, why? Like, why am I doing it? Is it because I'm stressed? Is it because I'm overwhelmed? Is it because I'm feeling really motivated at the minute, so I feel like I've got the time to do all these things? Because again, our feelings are going to change, like they do all of the time, whether we want them to or not. And our energy levels will change, and our capacity to do things will change, because unexpected things might often come up as well. And just asking ourselves, like, actually, as well, is this mine to promise and only mine, like in this instance? And if not, I might need to reconsider, have a look at the processes that hopefully are in place, and maybe communicate with other people to make things clear. And we might also need to be very, very clear with ourselves about what we're also doing that might be contributing to our stress. So sometimes people, you know, buddy up with someone and you have like a little accountability partner. So like you and your friend that you get on with in work, like you make sure that each other takes lunch, you make sure that each other goes for a walk, for example. On the days you don't want to do it, they'll encourage you. But yeah, we might really, really need to look at, again, those things that are like the oil and the water and the tires. Like, are they falling out of line a little bit? Because that isn't going to make anything easier. So typically, as a rule of thumb, if your instinct in that moment is to just, I don't know, sit on your phone for your whole lunch break, or when you get home from work, you just sit down straight away and put the telly on and you're just going to have a microwave meal. Like, if it's easier to do in that moment, the likelihood is that overall that's going to make life a little bit more difficult, because the things that we do more often than not, like, they accumulate and they change the way that our life feels. Whereas the things that feel harder to do on that moment, like, you know, getting off the sofa, like getting a shower when you get home, getting changed, going to play football with your friends, you know, going and buying some proper food, for example, overall they make life feel easier. Like, so it is true that, again, when things are really, really busy, there's a good chance we're going to feel overwhelmed at times, and maybe we'll be snappy, and there'll be times we're exhausted and we don't want to do things. We might struggle to switch off. And at the same time, there are things that we can do to make life easier. So we're going to think now about things that we can do and hold ourselves accountable to do to help us manage stress as it arises. So the first thing we're going to think about is just doing things differently. So number one, like, stop where we can telling ourselves how stressed we are all the time and how overwhelmed we are. Like, the way that we think about a situation will influence how we feel emotionally and also physically. Like, you know, again, whether or not our heart's racing and our breathing's going quicker and we're hot and tense and all that sort of stuff. And it's going to influence the way that we behave. So how we think about things carries an awful lot of weight. And if you're telling yourself all the time, all day, every day, how bad this is, how stressful this is, how overwhelmed you are amplifying all of that stress response. You're giving your brain reason to believe that this isn't good. So instead, like, what would be a little bit easier or better to hear, whether it's this time in a couple of hours it'll be done. I don't know how I'm going to be done yet, but one way or another, this is going to be done. I'll just take things one decision at a time, one thing at a time. Actually, we get through this every year. It's just a month this time. In a month, I'll feel very different, and everything else will feel easier then, because nothing will compare to this. I can do this, just focus, just whatever is going to be useful. And we can also think of the fact that you feel stressed as something that's useful. So there's research that's found, like, if you think of the fact that your heart's racing and your thoughts are racing and you're agitated and you're tense and you're hot and you've got a dry mouth and you're full of adrenaline, as signs that your body is going to help you to move quicker and think quicker and solve problems and make decisions. Physiologically, we experience a bit of a change. Physically, what happens when we're stressed versus when we're excited, physiologically is basically the same thing. Like, even cortisol goes through the roof when you're excited. So can we just think of ourselves as excited to do this, excited to get through this? I'm energized, I'm motivated, I'm prepared, like, this is good, like, this is going to help. We can think about, you know, whether it's you noticing that you're really, really flat one day, just again doing something different, such as like getting a bit of fresh air in the morning, or again on your break, getting a bit of fresh air, even if it's raining, because the last few days of doing nothing and just being sat around looking on your phone and probably looking at, I don't know, stuff about cars on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, like, if I don't feel better for having done it for the past week, try and do something different. So in the morning on the way into work, can you listen to music that makes you feel alive? Because again, that's going to energize you. And then when you're feeling stressed, you can tell yourself, actually, it's because I'm just so like energized and alert. If you're feeling really overwhelmed in work, can you literally even pick your favorite song, pop into the toilets and listen to like the chorus or whatever for like a minute? And again, just tell yourself, like, no, I'm not like overwhelmed, I'm just really, really energized, and like, actually I can do this. And the more you tell yourself that I'm really prepared to do this, this is going to be good, and you listen to music that energizes you, the quicker you notice that shift. We can also look at just changing our scenery for, again, just a couple of minutes long. So like, if you're working, I don't know, out front with all the cars, for example, with all the customers, and you're feeling overwhelmed, can you put yourself in the opposite environment for a minute? So if you've been inside all day under the fluorescent lights, can you go outside for 2? If you've been outside working in the workshop, or you're exposed to the elements or whatever, can you go inside for a couple of minutes? If you've been boiling all day or freezing all day, can you like create the opposite? Like, if we put ourselves in the opposite environment, essentially, again, and pay attention to that new environment, it helps our brain to kind of unwind a little bit and de-stress us, that when we do have to go back into it, we're not going back in with like the same level of stress to begin with. So again, we really, really need to like pay attention to the new environment, rather than like, you know, I think, well, I feel like I've been on my own a lot of today and it's been really noisy, so I'm just going to go and, like, I don't know, meet Nigel somewhere and just have a normal conversation for like a minute. You know, having a break from kind of the same stuff that's going around in your head will make a difference. So whether it's you're looking at, I don't know, what sounds do I hear here instead of where I was? Are my shoes now squeaking here? Am I slippy because I'm outside? Can I feel the breeze? I don't know, like, is the lighting different in here? If I'm in the bathroom, are the tiles on the floor? Like, just anything, just absolutely anything that makes you pay attention to where you are now, as opposed to where you were when you were feeling stressed in the moment. And we can also use like the cold to our benefit. Obviously, March, it can be quite cold anyway. We instinctively, when we're exposed to the cold as mammals, like, and particularly when the cold is exposed to our face, it activates this reflex that makes our body slow down for our survival's sake. So like, this is why like cold water swimming is really beneficial, in the cold water showers and stuff. So if you're noticing you're stressed or you're overwhelmed, can you literally go and splash cold water on your face for 30 seconds? Or can you run your arms under cold water for 30 seconds? So you might not notice much of a difference if it's just your hands, but in your wrists, you've got loads of nerves right near the surface of your skin. So that can help to activate it. Essentially, like, very quickly, you can notice all of these things, like your breathing might start to slow down again. You might feel a bit more relaxed. yeah, it might be distracting as well. You might be thinking about the fact that you're freezing rather than the fact that you've been feeling so stressed. Like, again, just using these things to our benefit, and it doesn't have to take long whatsoever. Like, for the sake of a 20-second walk to the bathroom, 30 seconds, and then a 20-second, walk back, you might feel very, very different, as opposed to just kind of trying to, shout at yourself to just push through it and then have a very difficult, I don't know, 4 hours, for example. We can also use a technique called progressive muscle relaxation, if anyone's ever heard of this. So essentially, again, with this, it's something we can do very, very quickly. It's something you can do anywhere. It's something you can do without other people noticing. It's very, very subtle. But again, because when we're stressed, like, our body tenses, like, because all this oxygen's going to our muscles to prepare us to do something, which is also why if you kind of stood still, you might notice you're shaking, because your body's trying to keep all the muscles ready to act and you're just not doing anything with it yet. So what we can do is, like, force our bodies to tense even more, so that when we relax the muscles, like, our whole body then starts to feel relaxed. And, like, our brains and bodies talk to each other all the time. Like, we've got this vagus nerve that connects our brain to all our organs, and they're constantly in contact, which is why, like, all of the things like food and exercise and sleep impact your mental health so much, because your brain is part of your body, and 80% of that information is your body telling your brain what's going on, and your body telling your brain how you're feeling. So use your body to make your brain think that you're more relaxed than you are. So again, you can do it kind of anywhere, but just to give you a real quick example, if anyone is comfortable where you are, just want you to imagine, we're just going to use our arms and hands for this. You can use your legs, you can use your torso, you can use your back, you can use your full body at one go. You might do a few goes of it, again, just in a couple of minutes, and it makes a difference. All I want you to do is imagine that you've got 2 oranges in your hand, and that we're going to squeeze them to try and get all the juice out. And at the same time, if you can see with my short little self, like, my arms are kind of coming up by the side of me as well. So, like, you tense your fists and your arms all at the same time, and essentially just kind of, we're not like, trying to break any world records here. We're not doing CrossFit, we're not doing anything like really, really strenuous, but there's like a bit of pressure. And if you start noticing that you're getting hot, that's normal. If you notice that you feel like you're shaking, can you see how my hands go? That's normal, that's expected. We kind of want that. And then when you're ready and you are feeling like, oh, this is getting a bit difficult now, you take a big deep breath in, and as you breathe out, you just let it go and, like, just shake it out. And that, again, you can do that with your hands in your pockets and your arms by your side, and no one can see you doing it. You can do it with your legs. No one can see you doing it. You can do it with your full body for a second. People might not notice you doing it. And it can be a very, very quick and effective way of just letting everything go, so that you feel less stressed, which again is going to make you look at the same situations a bit differently. But just do something, like, just do something different. Like, if, again, as I mentioned, like, you're after work, you are just sitting on the sofa, scrolling on your phone, ordering a takeaway. If you're doing that day after day, and after a week you don't feel better for having done it, do something different. Like, just try anything different, just be open. And the last thing we're thinking about then is communication. So when we're stressed, when we're overwhelmed, we are more likely to, like, jump to conclusions, predict things, make assumptions about other people. Like, our brains are assumption machines. We want to think about what's the likely thing that's going to happen. If I have to go and tell Nigel now that he's I don't know, he's forgot to charge this battery and now that's gone flat, and I'm assuming he's going to be annoyed and he's going to have a go at me and all that sort of stuff, which then impacts how I approach Nigel. If I'm assuming that he's going to be jumping down my throat, for example, we're also more likely to go a bit black and white with our thinking, very all and nothing, so we're less likely to hear alternative perspectives. So, like, if Nigel is bringing something to my attention that I or my team is doing that's impacting his team, I might be a bit more closed off initially and just think that what I think is the truth in that moment. We can take our thoughts as facts and think, just because I think this, that means it's absolutely true. We can take our emotions as facts. So again, Nigel comes to me and tells me there's a problem. If I then start feeling angry, I might take that as proof that he doesn't know what he's on about. He shouldn't be saying that. Who does Nigel think he's talking to me like this? So, like, we take our emotions as facts as well, and we can, like, go to different extremes. Like, we might see everything as the worst case scenario and get really, really flappy, or we might really minimize things and think, oh, that doesn't matter, and we kind of gloss over things. Like, we can understand that these things are going to change and they're going to impact the way we like communicate with each other. So you might need to accept that things might change for a little bit. People might be a little bit snappier at different times, and just be mindful that day to day these things will change. Again, if someone's hungry, or they've not slept, or they've got the flu, for example, they've got a cold, they're feeling physically unwell, like that's going to change. People are also more likely to end up run down, some pain, backs going a little bit. People might be a bit snappier, for example. That doesn't necessarily mean it's about us. Often, if someone doesn't, communicate with us the way we expect, we tend to see it somehow as a reflection on us, or what they see of us or think about us. And actually, it's often not the case. Like, the way that we respond to people often comes from either the way that I'm assuming they're going to react, and also how I'm feeling in myself. So again, it's really important that we hold ourselves accountable where we can, to be mindful of how you're feeling and how that might impact other people. So actually, am I gone because I'm really, really stressed and I'm in pain, I'm trying to manage that? Actually, I'm probably coming off as cold, and other people now feel tense when I walk in the room. So one very, very, very quick, easy thing to do, if you notice that you're getting a bit frustrated, that you're about to kind of bite someone's head off, jump down the throat, tell them where they're going wrong all the time, show them up, make an example of people, just ask yourself, like, this time tomorrow, will it matter? Like, or this time in 6 hours when I'm at home, like with my family, and I've got my feet up and we're talking about something else, is it going to matter? Like, because if it isn't, don't put yourself through it, let alone them. So we can kind of start to pick our battles a little bit better. If I'm not going to be bothered this time tomorrow, it might not be worth having the discussion about. Like, it's going to get sorted. Just let it go. If it still might matter this time next week, maybe it's something again down to like the processes that might need looking at. So we either do something about it then, or as soon as we can, and then again we try to let it go, because why put yourself through extra stress? And the same about this time next month. If actually, when all of this month is said and done, if I still think I'm going to be bothered about this, then there's a good chance again there's a real issue there that might need addressing. If not, again, what can I do now that's just going to make my today a little bit easier? And again, just be mindful that everyone's capacity is going to be different. Like day to day, some people will feel the stress a bit more quickly than others. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. They might have financial stresses, family worries, like other things going on. So not holding everybody to the same standards, that we think we would do something, essentially. And with that, like with regards to like your family and your relationships and your friends, like where we can, again, like just explain that things are going to be different for a period of time. Like, I am going to be really, really busy. I might not be as like available emotionally to hear all about your day the second I get in. And it's not about you, because again, we'll tend to think it's about us and that you're going off us, or you're in a mood with us and thinking, well, what have I done wrong? I've not done anything wrong. And then they might get annoyed with you. So actually just saying in advance, I might need a bit of time to decompress and just sit in the quiet. Or, I might not be as available to help with everything I do normally. And at the same time, these things are going to be temporary. And there's things we can do to look forward to at the end of the month. But just letting people know that things aren't as personal as they might feel if they don't know that things are going to change. And we can also communicate better with other people in work. So communicate with your team. Again, if you've not slept well, your back's playing up, you're stressed, you've not even been able to have breakfast this morning, like, just giving people an understanding in advance as to why you might not seem quite like yourself. For managers, if you can give people feedback when things are a little bit calmer, if people are already up to here, and then at that point you let them know that they made a mistake first thing this morning, if they're not actually in a position to rectify that now anyway, you are just likely to help send someone kind of below their top, I suppose. So actually, can you just wait until things are a bit calmer? And also, when you're a bit calmer, you're going to communicate that differently. Can you keep some sort of feedback open? So rather than, again, like communicating as managers, maybe like, you've done, this person in your team did this thing and they did that thing and they caused this thing, and I, like, this person in my team felt like this and they said that. Like, actually, can we just keep it to like the bigger issues, like the themes and stuff? Like, if there is something consistently happening that's falling down, can we have a very, very quick meeting to discuss that? bring some potential solutions? Can we do our best to try and be open-minded and adapt? Like the best way that we're going to find a way through is by trying things, and not everything will work, but we'll learn something. And can we be really, really mindful to like also share what's going well? Like our brains are very, very biased. They will, because they want to avoid experiencing it again. And we also have something called confirmation bias. So whatever I believe to be true, I will unintentionally look for all the evidence that that is the case, essentially. So if I think March is going to be hell, from the 1st of March, I'm going to start noticing everything going wrong and how stressed I am all day. If I decide even that I want to move house tomorrow, like I'll start noticing for sale signs everywhere, because now I've just told my brain that's relevant to me. So make sure that we're going above and beyond to tell our brain that what I want to look for is like the fact that we're doing this and it's going well, and just keep re-emphasizing that. And it's like a muscle, like the more we do it, the stronger that becomes, and the more confident people feel in themselves and in each other. But just be open, like where you can be open to trying different things, to not assuming that you are absolutely going to feel overwhelmed and it's inevitable. Be open to not knowing everything there is to know about yourself yet. Like some of the things that we've spoken about today might be really useful for you, and you might not think they would be yet because you've not experienced it. But once you give things a try, you might be surprised. And maybe can try to, like, you know, just do what you can to reduce your own stress for the benefit of everyone, because it's not supposed to be me versus you, which is how things might feel day to day, but about us as a whole, as a dealership, against this very busy period. So I suppose to summarize, plan as much as you can, you know, in advance. Plan to look after your well-being, plan as leaders, you know, agreed ways of working, time frames, have images about the place rather than like a massive document that to read. If it's images, it's short, it's snappy, they can find what they need in seconds, they're more likely to use it. Hold yourself accountable and each other. You know, again, if you notice that somebody isn't looking after themselves very well and it's showing, like, actually, can we, because we care about each other, hold ourselves a bit more accountable, encourage people to do things with you, and communicate as much as we can, as openly as we can, as early as we can. Essentially, the earlier we do it, the sooner things can be rectified if things do go wrong. And just remember that stress doesn't just come from like the stuff that's going on in your life, but about your thoughts about what's going on in your life. And that's something that we can do things about. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Hopefully that was somewhat useful and relevant. As mentioned earlier, we've got other webinars coming up. We've got one next week, haven't we, Nigel?
We have indeed, yeah, next week.
And we've got a couple after the registration period. So next week we've got one on unwinding after work and improving your sleep, because again, that is going to be a pretty big pillar, keystone, I suppose, to your well-being, getting through that busy period. And then afterwards, we've got a bit of a mental health MOT, checking in with yourself, seeing how you're doing and feeling, thinking about what you're doing well. Are there any advisories that we can work on? And then we're finishing up with something for managers to help support your teams if they are struggling with the mental health. But yeah, thank you everyone for being here. If you've got any questions or anything, please feel free to pop them in the chat. This is recorded, so we'll send that out afterwards, and we'll get that on YouTube so you can have a watch back. We can send the slides if anyone wants them. Please feel free to drop your email address in the chat as well. We'll get those over as soon as we can. And yeah, other than that, just thank you so much for being here, and may you have a lovely and restful rest of the day / week. And may you might not be too stressful. But yeah, thank you so much, Nigel. Thank you for all your help putting all of this together and bringing so much insight and information and examples. Hopefully that's been the thing that, you know, has really brought it to life, if anything, for people. So yeah, thank you so much to you and all the team at ECS for all your hard work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for that, and I hope everybody else has found it useful as well. So thank you, everybody. Cheers now.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you very much. That's lovely.